Monster Hunter World Iceborne's endgame can be a challenge for the best of hunters out there, but with the right weapons and builds, even endgame tasks can easily be achieved. I'm Darcblade and we're back with even more amazing builds for Monster Hunter World Iceborne. In this episode we're going to take a look at endgame builds for the Hunting Horn. The Hunting Horn is a very unique weapon. Making use of heavy, blunt attacks, is able to knock out monsters quite easily. But its blunt damage is not its main appeal. The main appeal and reason to take the Hunting Horn would be the variety of songs you can play. These songs can help buff you and your hunting party, enhancing everyone's capabilities and ultimately making hunts feel a little bit more easier. The builds I tend to use try to capitalise on the various songs the Hunting Horns have available to them, combined with a few other aspects that the Hunting Horn can naturally benefit from. But a disclaimer for this series though, these builds are aimed for endgame hunters who have completed the main story of Monster Hunter World Iceborne and have access to most of the armour and jewels in the game pre-Safi'Jiiva. But as always, if you don't have the jewels that are shown in the video, you can quite easily swap them out for something else. So the first build I use for the Hunting Horn is the Maximum Might build. This build makes use of the Maximum Might skill and associated set bonus, making for a strong damage build with high raw attack. So for this build you'll need the Ruinous Helm Beta, the Ruinous Mail Beta, Acidic Glavenus Braces Beta, Acidic Glavenus Coil Beta, and the Acidic Glavenus Greaves Beta. I'm also using the Critical Charm too, and for my weapon I'm using the Denden Doom Sounder, which is the Rajang Hunting Horn. This has an affinity increase augmentation, health regen augmentation, and then a defense increase augmentation. As for your mantles, these are down to personal preference with this build. As for your jewels, you've got a few to play around with here. Firstly, I've gone for Mighty Jewels to max out Maximum Might, along with Vitality Jewels to max out Health Boost. I've then gone for a Critical Jewel to max out the Crit Boost skill, Expert Jewels for some Critical Eye, Tenderizer Jewels for Weakness Exploit, a Sonorous Jewel for the Horn Maestro skill, a Sharp Jewel for Protected Polish, combined with a Hard Enduring Jewel for the Item Prolonger, and then the skills on the mantles, these are down to personal preference, to which I've gone for Maintenance and Further Jewels. This will give us the Tool Specialist skill as well as the Resentment skill. So, if you've done what I've done here, you should have a build with 150 health, 100 stamina, which will be 200 health and 150 stamina when you're on a hunt and taking all your relevant consumables. You'll have a raw attack of 1365 with white sharpness. You have 10% affinity, which can be higher. It can potentially be 100% affinity, so long as you have full stamina and thus have maximum might active, as well as taking advantage of weakness exploit by attacking monster weak points that are being tenderized through clutch claw attacks first. Anyway, you also have a thunder rating of 120, but this is not the main appeal of this build. We're focusing on raw damage over elemental damage, and when it comes to the songs on this Hunting Horn, you have access to attack and defense boost, another defense boost, stamina use reduction, wind pressure negated, and as for the echo waves, you'll have the Echo Wave Dragon and maximum stamina and recovery up. As for your defense, you have a strong defense of 956 that is strong against water and ice, but unfortunately weak to the other elements. Now as for the skills, you'll have Maximum Might level 5. Maximum Might is a skill that increases your base affinity so long as you have full stamina. Normally Maximum Might can only get to level 3, but at level 5 you get a few extra bonuses. If it's not at level 5, it takes a few seconds for Maximum Might to kick in again once your stamina is full up again. But with Maximum Might at level 5, you'll get that affinity bonus as soon as your stamina refills itself. Anyway, you have Health Boost level 3, increasing our maximum health to that potential 200. You have Critical Eye level 3, increasing the base affinity of this build. You have Crit Boost level 3, which increases the damage of our attacks if they should crit a monster, but this only applies to the raw portion of our attack, which should still be substantial with this build given the high raw attack of the weapon we're using. You have Weakness Exploit level 3. Weakness Exploit increases our affinity by a set percentage so long as we're attacking monster weak points, and if these weak points are tenderized through clutch claw attacks first, this increase to our affinity is even more. You have Item Prolonger level 3. Item Prolonger increases the duration of certain item buffs, and this does work mainly in conjunction with Protected Polish, which we'll talk about in a minute. You have Stun Resistance level 2, a byproduct of the gear we're wearing but helps resist stun effects. You have Handicraft level 2, increasing the sharpness of our weapon, allowing us to get to white sharpness. You have Horn Maestro level 2, this is thanks to the Sonorous Jewel. This allows the songs and melodies we play to last longer. You have Stamina Surge level 2, this is again a byproduct of the armour we're wearing, but allows us to regenerate our stamina at a quicker rate. You have Protected Polish level 1, which is a buff you can put over your sharpness gauge, preventing any sharpness loss for a small duration of time after you've sharpened your weapon. And this does work in unison with Item Prolonger, allowing that Protected Polish buff to remain active for a longer period. Finally, when you're wearing your mantles, you have Resentment level 2, which gives us an increase to our raw attack when we have a portion of red health on our health bar. And finally, you'll have Tool Specialist level 2, reducing the cooldown on our specialist tools such as mantles and boosters by a small percentage. So those are the skills. As for the set bonuses, you have 2 of them. First of all, you'll have the Glavinus Essence, Maximum Might Secret, allowing us to get that Maximum Might skill up from level 3 to a maximum of level 5. And you'll also have Nergigante's Ambition, Hasten Recovery, allowing us to recover health when we're attacking a monster, and this does work in unison with the health regen augmentation on our weapon, so it provides us a decent amount of health regeneration so long as we're on the offense. So there we have it, that is the Maximum Might Hunted Horn build I like to use. Now of course with every build out there in Monster Hunter World Iceborne there are pros and cons. The biggest pro for this build is its high damage output. Thanks to being able to get to 100% affinity, coupled with the Rajang Hunting Horn's high raw attack and crit boost, it means that our attacks should be hitting quite hard. On top of that, it also has some survival options in the form of a decent amount of health regen. It's not the best health regen out there, but it's still substantial enough that you don't always have to sheath your weapon and drink a potion. And then finally with this build, it also comes with fairly good songs for the Hunting Horn. Maybe not the best out there, but they're still useful, functional, they increase our attack and defense, as well as provide a few quality of life melodies. But unfortunately, every build out there has its cons. One of the biggest cons with this build is its low handicraft. Even though we have Protected Polish and Item Prolonger which slightly offsets this a little bit, you've only got a sliver of white sharpness and you can normally burn through that quite quickly in an extended encounter. And the other con is unfortunately this is a little bit of a jaw heavy build, requiring a lot of affinity based jaws to make it work. But regardless, this is a fun build to use, especially if you get used to managing your stamina and not rolling all the time, thus allowing you to keep that maximum might active for longer periods and capitalizing the most on your high affinity rating. This is also a build that you can pretty much take against any monster, because even though this is a thunder weapon, its thunder rating is so low and its raw attack is so high, it shouldn't really matter in the scheme of things, making for a powerful build. But anyway, let's move on to the next build, which is the True Critical Element build. This build is an elemental build making use of the Dragon element as well as the True Critical Element set bonus found on the Silver Rathalos set. So for this build, you'll need the Golden Loon Helm Beta, the Silver Soul Mel Beta, Silver Soul Braces Beta, Silver Soul Coil Beta, and the Silver Soul Greaves Beta. I'm also using a Worm's Bane Charm 5, although this can be swapped out to match whatever element you are using if you so wish to use a different weapon. And for my weapon, I'm using the Stygian Tristia, which is the Stygian Zinogre Hunting Horn. Now the Stygian Zinogre Hunting Horn may not be the best out there, especially when it comes to songs, but the way it looks, its dragon rating, elder seal and sharpness is the reason I'm taking this weapon. Anyway, this weapon has a health regen augmentation and an element up augmentation as well. Now, as for the jewels, you've got a fair few to play around with here again, to which I've gone for Mighty Jewels again for maximum might, Tenderizer Jewels for weakness exploit, a Sonorous Jewel for the Horn Maestro, a Dragon Jewel to max out the dragon rating of this build. This Dragon Jewel will be replaced to match whatever element you are using if you so wish to use a different element. I've gone for Vitality Jewels to max out health boost, a Sharp Jewel for Protected Polish, Protection Jewels for the Divine Blessing, and Expert Jewels for some critical eye. As for the jewels on the mantles, these are down to personal preference as always, to which I've gone for Expert Jewels and KO Jewels for the Slugger skill. So if you've done what I've done here, you should have a build with 150 health, 100 stamina, which would be 200 health and 150 stamina when you're on a hunt, taking all your relevant consumables. You have an attack of 1197 with purple sharpness. You have 10% affinity, which can be 100% so long as you're attacking monster weak points that have been tenderized through clutch claw attacks first. You have a 10% base affinity, which can be 90% so long as you have full stamina and are attacking monster weak points that have been tenderized through clutch claw attacks first. You have a dragon rating of 610 with average elder seal, and when it comes to your songs, you have hearing protection and wind pressure negated, elemental attack boost, sonic waves, blight resistant boost, blight negated, and for your echo waves you have echo wave dragon and elemental effectiveness up. As for your defenses, you have a strong defense again of 959 that is strong against fire and dragon, but unfortunately weak to the other elements. As for the skills, you have Dragon Attack level 6, increasing the dragon damage and rating of this build. This can be replaced to match whatever element you are using if you are using a different element, so it could be Ice Attack, Fire Attack, so on and so forth. Anyway, you have Capacity Boost level 5. This is a byproduct of the armor we're wearing, but allows us to equip and carry more slinger ammunition. You have Health Boost level 3, Critical Boost level 3. Remember, Critical Boost only applies to the raw portion of our attack. It will do nothing towards the dragon rating when we attack a monster and it crits. You have Weakness Exploit level 3, Divine Blessing level 3. Divine Blessing is a decent defensive skill that gives us a chance at receiving reduced damage when we take a hit from a monster. You have maximum might level 3, critical eye level 2, which can be potentially level 4 when we're wearing our mantles. You have Horn Maestro level 2, Windproof level 1, again another byproduct but helps resist minor wind effects. You have Protective Polish level 1, and when we're wearing the Impact Mantle you also have Slugger at level 2, increasing the knockout potential of our attacks. Finally, when it comes to the set bonus, you have the Silver Rathalos Essence. This provides you with the Slinger Ammo secret, which allows us to get the Slinger capacity skill from level 3 to a maximum of level 5, and more importantly you also have True Critical Element. Think of this like critical boost, but for the elemental portions of our attacks. So when our hit crits a monster, the elemental damage will be increased. And this increase in elemental damage is even more potent thanks to the set bonus being True Critical Element instead of the bog standard Critical Element. So there we have it. As you can see, it's a powerful elemental DPS build, but as always, there are pros and cons. The biggest pro for this build is its elemental damage, and as long as you're taking into account a monster's elemental weaknesses, you should be able to bring them down quite quickly. On top of that, it's a build that can be easily customized to use any element in the game. Say if you're going up against a monster that is strong and resistant to the dragon element, you can easily swap out the weapon, charm, and that single jewel for any of the other elements in the game. And then finally for the pros, when it comes to the melodies on this hunting horn, it isn't the best out there, but it does benefit teams that are utilising elemental weapons. But unfortunately there are cons. The biggest con for this build is its lack of handicraft, meaning that if you do swap out the hunting horn, you may not be able to get to purple sharpness. And the other major con is unfortunately the songs for this hunting horn do not benefit non-elemental weapons, unfortunately. But regardless, like I said, so long as you're taking into account a monster's elemental weakness, this build can rip through them quite easily and efficiently. Which brings us onto our next build, which is a little bit of a quirky niche build, which is the Crowd Control Hunting Horn build. This build makes use of the Paralysis element combined with the maxed out Slugger skill, allowing you to crowd control a monster, often allowing for you and your hunting party to deal uninterrupted damage to a monster. So for this build you'll need the Golden Headdress Beta, the Diablos Nero Mail Beta, Diablos Nero Braces Beta, Diablos Nero Coil Beta, and the Garuga Greaves Beta. I'm also using the Handicraft Charm 4, and for my weapon I'm using the Queen's Flute 2. This is the Vespoid Hunting Horn. This has a status effect up, augmentation, and then a health regen augmentation. Now as for the jewels, you've got a lot to play around with here, to which I've gone for Paralyzer jewels to max out the paralysis attack of this build. I've also gone for KO jewels to max out the Slugger skill. I've then gone for Vitality jewels for health boost, a Sonorous jewel for Horn Maestro, Drain jewels for the Stamina Thief skill, Tenderizer jewels for Weakness Exploit, and a Sharp jewel for Protective Polish. As for the jewels on the mantles, a Hard Enduring jewel for the Item Prolonger skill, and finally I've gone for Mighty jewels for the Maximum Might skill. So if you've done what I've done here, you should have a build with 150 health, 100 stamina, which will be 200 health and 150 stamina when you're on a hunt taking all your relevant consumables. You have an attack of 1155 with purple sharpness. You have an affinity rating of 10%, which can be potentially 70% when we're attacking monster weak points that have been tenderized through clutch claw attacks, and we have 4 stamina. And finally I've gone for Mighty jewels for the Maximum Might skill. You have a paralysis rating of 680. And when it comes to the songs on this weapon, unfortunately they're not the greatest. You have access to defense boost, stamina use reduced, all wind pressure negated, ice resistance boost, sonic waves, and for the echo waves you have max stamina up and recovery, as well as elemental effectiveness up. So for this hunting horn, unfortunately we're taking it mainly for its knockout potential and paralysis rating, and we're not really focusing on the songs per se. Anyway, as for your defense, you have a decent defense of 907, that is strong against fire, thunder and dragon, but unfortunately weak to water and ice. As for the skills, you have Slugger at level 5. Normally Slugger can only get to level 3, but at level 5 it vastly increases the knockout potential of the hunting horn, so long as you're attacking monster heads. You also have Paralysis attack level 4, increasing the paralysis rating and build up of the element with this build, allowing us to paralyze and thus crowd control a monster more often. You have Handicraft level 4, Health Boost level 3, Weakness Exploit level 3, Stamina Thief level 3. Stamina Thief is a skill that allows us to exhaust monsters when we're attacking them, and with the hunting horn being a blunt weapon, if we're attacking anything other than the head, it has a natural exhaust effect to its attacks. This basically increases that effect. You also have Item Prolonger level 3, Critical Eye level 2, Horn Maestro level 2, Marathon Runner level 2, a byproduct of the gear. It's not really needed that much on this build. Marathon Runner basically reduces the stamina consumption of moves that consume stamina. With this build it could be applied to when we're sprinting. You have Resentment level 1, and you have Maximum Might at level 1, which can be potentially level 3 when we're wearing our mantles. You also have Protective Polish level 1, and finally when it comes to the set bonuses, you have one of them, which is the Diablos Ambition Slugger Secret, allowing us to increase the Slugger skill from level 3 to a maximum of level 5. So there you have it. As you can see, it is a little bit of a niche build. It's more aimed to be used in groups than solo. With the right rotation and playstyle, you should be able to crowd control a monster through a combination of knocking it out through the Slugger skill, paralysing it through the paralysis attack, and exhausting it through the stamina thief skills. But every build has its pros and cons. The three major pros for this build all apply to its crowd controlling effects. Firstly, you have the Slugger secret, allowing us to knock out a monster more often, so long as we're attacking the monster's head, thus providing a crowd controlling aspect in that sense. You also have the paralysis attack, which is the second pro, allowing us to paralyze a monster more often. And then finally you have the exhaust effect through Stamina Thief, allowing us to exhaust a monster more often, again allowing us for some uninterrupted damage from us and our hunting party. But there are cons. Unfortunately, the two biggest cons for this build is unfortunately the melodies with the Queen's Flute 2 are not exactly the most beneficial out there. There are better songs, but this is also the weapon that has the highest paralysis attack. That's the reason we've gone for it. And the other con is unfortunately the Stamina Thief and exhausting a monster does not apply to Elder Dragons. So when taking this build to an Elder Dragon fight, you would lose one aspect of your crowd controlling capabilities. But regardless, this is a fun build to use, especially if you're playing in a group, and it's definitely one for players who like to fulfill a certain role when they're in a group. Which brings us on to our next build, which is the Master's Touch build. This is more of a straightforward DPS build, allowing us to deal maximum damage coupled with decent melodies and songs. So for this build you'll need the Kaiser Crown Beta, Rex Royal Male Beta, the Kaiser Van Braces Beta, Kaiser Coil Beta, and the Garuga Grease Beta. I'm also using a Challenger Charm 4, and for my weapon I'm using the Ruinous Desolation. This is the Ruiner Nergigante Hunting Horn. This has an affinity increase augmentation, health regen augmentation, and then an augmentation of your choice, to which I've gone for a defense increase augmentation. As for your jewels, you've got a few to play around with here, to which I've gone for critical jewels for the critical boost skill, tenderizer jewels for weakness exploit, attack jewels for the attack boost skill, sonorous jewels for the Horn Maestro skill, vitality jewels for health boost, a challenger jewel to max out the agitator skill, expert jewels for some critical eye, a phoenix jewel for the coalescence skill, and KO jewels for the slugger skill. So if you've done what I've done here, you should have a build with 150 health, 100 stamina, which would be 200 health and 150 stamina when you're on a hunt and taking all your relevant consumables. You have an attack of 1331 with white sharpness. You have 55% base affinity, which can easily be 100% so long as you're attacking monster weak points that have been tenderized through clutch claw attacks first. You have a dragon rating of 210 with high elder seal. And when it comes to the songs with the Ruiner Nergigante Hunting Horn, you have a few decent ones, including health recovery, affinity boost, hearing protection, and as for your Echo Waves, you have Echo Waves Dragon and extended health recovery. As for your defense, you have a strong defense of 968 that is strong against fire, thunder, and dragon, but weak to water and ice. But as for the skills, you have Critical Eye level 7, Agitator level 5. Agitator is a buff that kicks in when a monster becomes enraged, increasing your raw attack as well as your base affinity. You have Attack Boost level 4, which can be level 6 when we're wearing our mantles. Attack Boost is a skill that increases the raw attack of the weapon we're using, and at level 4 or above it also provides us a bonus 5% base affinity. You have Health Boost level 3, Critical Boost level 3, Weakness Exploit level 3, Blast Attack level 2. This is a byproduct of the gear we're wearing. It does nothing for this build unless we were to be using a blast weapon, in which case it would increase the blast rating and build up of that ailment. Anyway, you have Horn Maestro level 2, Heat Guard level 1, another byproduct of the gear, which helps us resist the damage and heat effects of hot areas such as the lava zones in the Guiding Lands and Elder's Recess. You have Slugger level 1, which can be potentially level 3 when we're wearing the Impact Mantle. You have Latent Power level 1, again another byproduct, but it's still useful. It's a buff that kicks in when we've taken enough damage from a monster or we've been fighting that said monster for a certain duration of time, increasing our affinity as well as reducing our stamina consumption. Anyway, you also have Coalescence level 1, which is a buff that kicks in after we remove a blight from our hunter, increasing our raw attack, elemental damage, as well as ailment damage. And then finally for the set bonus, you have the Teostra's Technique, Master's Touch, preventing any sharpness loss when we crit a monster. And as this build has an incredibly high crit rating, we should see next to no sharpness loss whatsoever. So there we have it. As you can see, it is a strong standard DPS build that makes use of the Master's Touch skill. But it does have pros and cons. The biggest pros for this build is its high DPS output, thanks to the Ruinous Desolation Hunting Horn. Having such high raw attack coupled with all the DPS skills we have, it means that we should be able to take down monsters quite quickly, even if they are resistant to the dragon element. On top of that, the weapon we're using also comes with decent quality of life songs. These songs that increase our affinity as well as provide earplugs and more will definitely make a hunt feel easier than it is. And finally, when it comes to the pros, you should see next to no sharpness loss and thus have no sharpness issues with this build thanks to the high affinity we have coupled with the Master's Touch set bonus. But unfortunately there are cons, the biggest one being that there is no handicraft on this build, so if you did want to swap the weapon out for something else that could get to purple sharpness, it means that you're going to have to make sacrifices somewhere. And then finally with the cons, unfortunately again, this is unfortunately a jaw heavy build requiring quite a few jaws to make it work. But regardless, this is a strong build to use and can be taken against pretty much any monster thanks to the high raw attack of the weapon we're using, and this is definitely one for players who hate to have to manage their sharpness gauge. Which brings us on to our fifth and final build, which is the Guiding Lands Survival build. This is a build that players can take into the Guiding Lands and farm the area quite effectively. In a way, it's kind of a jack of all trades build. So for this you'll need the Fell Shroud Helm beta, the Golden Loon Mail beta, Fell Shroud Braces beta, Golden Loon Coil beta, and the Shara Ishvalda Greaves beta. I'm also using a Handicraft Charm 4, and for my weapon I'm using the Soulfire Chorus Ruin. This has an affinity increase augmentation, health regen augmentation, and then an augmentation of your choice, to which I've gone for a defense increase augmentation. So as for the jaws, you've got a lot to play around with here. So we've gone for first Tenderizer Jaws for Weakness Exploit, then gone for Vitality Jaws for the Health Boost skill, Recovery Jaws for the Recovery Speed skill, Sonorous Jaws for the Horn Maestro skill, Destroyer Jaws for Part Breaker, Hard Enduring Jaw for the Item Prolonger skill coupled with the Sharp Jaw for Protected Polish. I've then gone for a Fortitude Jaw for the Fortify skill, as well as a Geology Jaw for the Geologist skill. We'll talk about this more in a minute. I've gone for Medicine Jaws for the Recovery Up skill, and finally a Flawless Jaw for the Peak Performance skill. As for the jaws and the mantles, these are down to personal preference, to which I've gone for Hard Defense Jaws as well as KO Jaws. So if you've done what I've done here, you should have a build with 150 health, 100 stamina, which will be 200 health and 150 stamina when you're on a hunt and taking all your relevant consumables. You have an attack of 1197 with purple sharpness. You have 10% base affinity, which can be 60% affinity so long as you're attacking monster weak points that will be tenderized through clutch claw attacks first. You have a blast rating of 210. When it comes to the songs with the Soulfire Chorus Ruin, you basically have access to the Ruin Energigante songs, so you have access to health recovery, affinity boost, hearing protection, and for the Echo Waves you have Echo Waves Dragon and extended health recovery. As for your defense, you have a strong defense of 979, that is strong against fire, water and dragon, but unfortunately a little bit weak to thunder and ice. So as for the skills, you have Divine Blessing at level 5, Divine Blessing can normally only get to level 3, but at level 5 it increases the chance of taking less damage when we take a hit from a monster even more. You have Handicraft level 4, Health Boost level 3, Recovery Up level 3. Recovery Up is a skill that increases the effectiveness of our healing, so when we drink a healing potion for example, it will heal for more. And this does work in unison with other healing factors such as Super Recovery and Hasten Recovery. You also have Recovery Speed level 3, this allows us to recover our health at a quicker rate, but normally this only applies to the red portion of our health bar. But this works in unison with the set bonus Super Recovery, which we'll talk about in a minute. You have Weakness Exploit level 3, Part Breaker level 3, which is an essential skill for the Guiding Lands as it allows us to break monster body parts more easily and thus break off monster materials more easily. You have Peak Performance level 3, which increases our raw attack so long as we have full health. You have Item Prolonger level 3, Horn Maestro level 2, Defense Boost level 1, which can be potentially level 7 when we're wearing our mantles, which increases the defense rating and elemental defenses of this build. You have Fortify level 1, which is a useful skill for the Guiding Lands. Basically every time you faint you come back with increased attack and defense. This buff can be applied up to 2 times. You have Geologist level 1, which is an odd skill, but it is useful in the Guiding Lands. It basically allows us to loot the monster materials that we break off of them twice instead of just once, but this only applies to the high tier monsters. You also have Protected Polish level 1, Hasten Recovery level 1. Hasten Recovery is normally found on the Nergigante set bonus, but can also be found on the Soulfire Chorus Ruin, which allows us to recover our health when attacking a monster, and this does work in unison with the health regen augmentation. And finally, when you're wearing your mantles, you also have Slugger level 2. As for the set bonuses, you have 2 of them. First is the Goldrathian Essence Divine Blessing Secret, allowing us to get that Divine Blessing skill from level 3 to a maximum of level 5, and you'll also have the Vow Soul Vein Super Recovery, allowing our health to regenerate the entire health bar, not just the red portion of the health. And this does work in unison with other health regen related skills such as Recovery Up and, more importantly, Recovery Speed. so we'll have a constant health regen feature with this build, adding to our survivability. So there we have it. As you can see, it is a little bit of a jack of all trades build aimed at farming the Guiding Lands. But of course there are pros and cons. The biggest pros for this build is it's an all-round build, able to pretty much take on any monster quite comfortably and farm them in the Guiding Lands quite effectively. It is also quite a defensive build. Thanks to the high amounts of health regen it has, you're able to survive most encounters and rarely will you have to sheath your weapon and drink the potion. And then finally, when it comes to the pros, this is also a build that has quite a few quality of life skills, coupled with quality of life melodies and songs, thanks to the Soulfire Chorus Ruin, which can be applied to our entire hunting party, not just ourselves. But unfortunately there are cons. The biggest con for this build is unfortunately it doesn't have the highest damage output, but we are sacrificing a little bit of damage for more comfortable hunts. But regardless, this is a fun build to use and is especially good if you're farming the Guiding Lands in a group. So there we have it, those are some of the builds that I tend to use for the Hunting Horn in Monster Hunter World Iceborne. Now of course there are more builds on the way, especially with Season 5 on the horizon, which will include everything post Safi'Jiiva, and of course, as I always say, you don't have to use what is shown in these videos. These videos are mainly templates to spark imagination and give you guys some ideas. So until next time, I've been Darcblade, bringing the builds I use for the Hunting Horn in Monster Hunter World Iceborne. Hope you enjoyed the video, thanks for watching, subscribe and like for more.